from New Delhi. You're watching DD India Global. We'll get your top stories from India and the region. I'm Tanvi Taneja. And for news from the rest of the world, I'm joined by my colleague in Washington, D.C., Nick Harper. Hi, Nick.
Good morning, Tanvi. It's 10 a.m. here in Washington, D.C., 3 in the afternoon across Central Europe. Coming up in the programme today, groups look to engage American youth in politics, and more airstrikes in Gaza as Israel targets Hamas militants. But first, the headlines.
IMF in its World Economic Outlook raises India's growth forecast to 7% for fiscal year 2024-25, sees steady global growth over the next 2 years. Kenyan police fire live ammunition and tear gas as protesters in Nairobi continue to demand President William Ruto to step down. Rwanda's Paul Kagame all set for a landslide win in presidential elections and secure a fourth consecutive term in office. And a group of lawmakers call on the EU to strip Hungary of voting rights after Prime Minister Viktor Orban's visit to Moscow and Beijing. Orban says Donald Trump, if elected, can be a peace broker in the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Up first, news from Africa. At least one person was killed in renewed anti-government protests across Kenya on Tuesday. Kenya's police clashed with demonstrators who are demanding the resignation of President William Ruto. In Kitengela, on the outskirts of capital Nairobi, police fired repeatedly at hundreds of protesters. In Nairobi's city centre, police fired tear gas at several dozen protesters. Youth-led nationwide protests broke out a month ago against the proposed tax hikes there. These protests have continued even after President William Ruto withdrew $2.7 billion in tax hikes on June 26th and sacked nearly his entire cabinet. According to Kenya's National Commission on Human Rights, at least 50 people have been killed in these protests to date. DD India's Nakeria Isabel joins us from the Ugandan capital Kampala now on the story. Isabel, one could call it people's power on display here in Kenya because these protests are not dying down. How is William Ruto likely to respond to these agitations?
Yes, that's right. Anti-government protesters have hit the streets once again in Kenya's major towns, and many people are marching on the streets, carrying placards and shouting anti-government slogans. But unlike the last protests, this protest, not many people have come out on the streets. We hear that many people have feared to come out on the streets because police is firing live ammunition and tear gas at protesters. In fact, we have been told that one journalist has been shot on her thigh, a girl from K24 TV, and she was rushed to hospital. We've also seen that CNN reporting one of their videographers lobbied tear gas at him. And of course, police says that the protests have been infiltrated by goons and they will come hard on them. Of course, the firing of tear gas has continued, but protesters have said that they will continue going on the streets. Right now, there have been reports of masked men not wearing uniform. They are wearing civilian clothes, carrying sticks, moving on the streets, and there have been reports of abductions. We've also been told that some of the protesters were arrested and no one knows where they are. In fact, some protesters went into a police station and they threatened to set free some of the people who were arrested, and police had to fire back tear gas.
Okay, thank you, Isabel, for those updates. Citizens of Rwanda voted to elect their next president on Monday, with early results showing incumbent Paul Kagame in the lead with over 99% of the votes cast. Monday's vote is widely expected to give Kagame a fourth term and extend his near quarter century in charge of the East African country. Presidential candidates Frank Habineza from the Democratic Green Party and an independent, Felipe Maipana, said that they were hoping to make some progress. But analysts and rights groups say that Kagame's overwhelming victory is certain. Results are expected by the 20th of July. On to the US now. After former US President Donald Trump survived an assassination attempt at a Pennsylvania rally, questions are being raised about what provoked 20-year-old Thomas Matthew Crooks for the shooting. My colleague Nick Harper is in Washington, D.C. and gives us more on this and other stories making headlines around the world. Nick, is American youth confused at this time regarding the elections and overall political scenario in the US?
Well, Tanvi, in terms of that shooting, there's still a lot that's still not known about the attempted assassination, including the gunman's motives. But it does come at a time when organisations are trying to get more young people involved in politics. On Monday, teenagers and young people aged 13 to 25 gathered in New York City for a day-long course in civic engagement sponsored by non-profit organisation DoSomething.org. The goal of the event, titled Show Up for What?, was to give young people civic knowledge and equip them with the skills they need to vote in the upcoming 2024 presidential election.
We know that there are 41 million new eligible voters who've come eligible to vote since 2020. And if we even just look at 2024 alone, 8.3 new voters who are eligible to vote. There's a lot to show up for, and we've heard young people tell us again that they want to make their voices heard. And so today we're just bringing young people together to equip them with the civic identity, give them some more civic knowledge, and definitely the skills they need to show up for this election and all the elections to come.
To Europe now, and a group of 63 European parliamentary lawmakers have asked the EU to withdraw Hungary's voting rights in the bloc in response to Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban's recent visits to Moscow and Beijing. Orban met Donald Trump here in the US, but also Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping in a self-styled peace mission to end the conflict in Ukraine. The lawmakers say that Orban had deliberately implied he was acting on behalf of the entire EU, despite not having the authority to do this. Hungary took over the rotating EU presidency this month. Meanwhile, in a letter to EU leaders, Orban said US Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump is ready to act immediately as a peace broker in the Russia-Ukraine war if he's elected in November. Malta's Roberta Metsola secured a broad backing for a new term as President of the European Parliament on Tuesday. Metsola, who took the post up in 2022, is only the second president, after Germany's Martin Schulz, to win another term since the EU Parliament became directly electable institution back in 1979. In continuing a largely ceremonial role, Metsola will preside over a 720-member parliament. Addressing the EU, Metsola said that the Parliament should continue to be a strong supporter of Ukraine and seek the power to propose EU legislation. Well, to break it down and to get more on all of this, Alex Carrier is joining us live from Brussels. Alex, first of all, Roberta Metsola will be presiding over a very different Parliament this time round. How challenging is this term going to be?
Yeah, Nick. A very challenging term, a very divided Parliament, a very fractious Parliament this time around. Certainly a challenging set of circumstances for EU lawmakers across the board, because more than a quarter of this Parliament is either hard right or far right. Now, I make that distinction because the European Parliament is all about coalitions and cooperations and teams working together to get legislation passed or opposed, and far right-wing groups are not necessarily aligned. You have the 80-plus grouping that comes with Viktor Orban's MEPs, Marine Le Pen's MEPs from France, but also even further to the right, a smaller group of 25 deemed anti-woke, anti-LGBT, anti-green agenda, anti-support for Ukraine. These groupings will become a real challenge for that centre-left, centre-right, centrist group of parties which has the governing majority, led by parties like the EPP of Ursula von der Leyen and the incoming President Roberta Metsola. But it is a fractious, divided parliament. There will be division over support for Ukraine, over climate change, over migration, all of these hot button issues. On the big ones, the governing coalition of the centre-right, centre-left and middle will hold, but those far-right parties will still be able to make some noise and drive some wedges within that governing coalition in the next 5 years. So certainly that European Parliament is going to be quite explosive in the next weeks and months, Nick.
And Alex, next to face Parliament is Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. Will her confirmation be quite as smooth?
No, in a word, it will not be as easy. Roberta Metsola was basically a shoo-in. She's in the European Parliament for another 2.5 years. But Ursula von der Leyen, the incumbent president of the European Commission, that building behind me, that building which holds such an enormous amount of power in the European institutions, well, she has some opponents, particularly on the right wing, and therefore she is meeting with MEPs from across the political divide, from the left, from the right, trying to garner support. She said she would work with anybody who is pro-Ukraine, pro-Europe and pro-rule of law. That means she'll work with the left, she'll work with the right, so long as they support those three key issues. Now that will be a challenge. I heard just a few hours ago from a senior member of her party saying that she has the numbers, but it will be a challenge. So she is out there stumping, meeting with MEPs, trying to make sure she has a buffer to get through this particularly challenging vote. She got through back in 2019 with just a handful of votes for the last time. Beyond that, even if she does get selected by the Parliament and gets through this phase, it will still be a challenge. The European Parliament is full of some of Ursula von der Leyen's detractors, particularly on her right flank, so certainly something to watch over the next few months. It will be quite a testy Parliament for the next 5 years, Nick.
Alex Carrier live for us in Brussels. Alex, thanks for the insight and the update. Well, next today, Israel struck the southern and central Gaza Strip on Monday to put more pressure on Hamas. It follows a weekend strike targeting the terrorist group's leadership. The main focus of Israel's advance since May has been further south in Rafah, though its military has also stepped up aerial and tank shelling in central Gaza. On Saturday, Israel struck Mawasi on the western outskirts of Khan Yunis. The town had been sheltering hundreds of thousands of Palestinians who fled to the area after Israel declared it a safe zone. Well, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken met with Israel's National Security Advisor, Tzachi Han-Egbi, and Israel's Minister of Strategic Affairs, Ron Dermer, in Washington, D.C. on Monday to discuss practical solutions to bridge differences between Israel and Hamas on a ceasefire deal. Israeli officials confirmed that Israel is still committed to reaching a ceasefire deal under terms laid out by US President Joe Biden on May the 31st.
They discussed the latest in the ceasefire negotiations that are ongoing, where we are trying to reach a ceasefire that would secure the release of hostages, alleviate the suffering of the Palestinian people. They talked about plans for the day after the conflict and how to establish governance and security in Gaza. And of course, as always, the Secretary raised the need to even in advance of a hoped-for ceasefire, do more to resolve logistical issues that are preventing humanitarian assistance from being fully delivered across the Gaza Strip. Israel is still committed to reaching a ceasefire, that Israel wants to reach a ceasefire. Obviously, they want to protect their interests. We understand that as part of the negotiating process, but they do want to reach a ceasefire and are committed to these negotiations.
Israeli army said that its air defense systems identified some 20 rockets launched from Lebanon on Monday night. Flares and explosions lit up northern Israel's sky as rockets fired from Lebanon intercepted over the town of Kiryat Shimona. The army also said that no casualties were reported from the attack. Dozens of northern Israeli towns and villages were evacuated as a result of all of that taking place. Ukrainian drone attacks caused a fire at an electrical device factory which wounded at least 6 people in Russian areas bordering Ukraine. Interim governor of Russia's Kursk region said none of the workers were injured in the attack. Russia's defense ministry said its air defense systems destroyed 13 Ukrainian drones overnight, including 1 drone over the Kursk region. As per local media, authorities are considering evacuating people from regions that are close to the Ukrainian border. K-pop boy group NCT 127 dropped their 6th full-length studio album, Walk, on Monday. Alongside the album's digital release, the group also dropped a music video for the record's lead single, also titled Walk. The genre mixing group also blended soul, funk, jazz, R&B, rock and electro trap sounds on this record. Catchy songs there. Well, that's it from me, Tanvi. Back to you in the studio.
Thank you, Nick. Nick Harper joining us all from Washington, D.C. Still to come on DD India Global. Hundreds injured in violent clashes in varsities across Bangladesh as students protest the government's job quota system. And a documentary about women and their societal struggles called The Brink of Dreams becomes the first Egyptian documentary to win the Cannes Golden Eye Award.
As the world gears up for the biggest sporting extravaganza, Olympics 2024, we at DD India are all set to bring you reports, reactions and all the latest action from Ground Zero. Watch DD India's super exclusive show, Cheer for Bharat. Only on DD India from July the 22nd at 6:30 p.m. IST, 1 p.m. GMT. Get ready to cheer for Indian athletes at the Paris Olympics 2024.
Thank you for staying with us. You're watching DD India Global. I'm Tanvi Taneja. On Tuesday, the International Monetary Fund, IMF, cautioned that the global economy is poised for moderate growth in the next 2 years, marked by varying trends across major economies. In its latest update to its World Economic Outlook, IMF delivered a positive outlook for the Indian economy, increasing the country's growth forecast for the fiscal year 2024-25 to 7%, up from 6.8% projected in April. As per IMF, the United States is experiencing cooling economic activity, while Europe appears to have reached a stabilizing point. IMF also highlighted a deceleration in the fight against inflation, potentially prolonging the delay in interest rate adjustments and maintaining strong pressure on developing economies from a robust US dollar. The IMF maintained its global real GDP growth forecast for 2024 at 3.2%, unchanged from its April projections, and slightly raised its 2025 forecast by 0.1 percentage point to 3.3%. India's Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal is in Italy to participate in the outreach session of the G7 Trade Ministers meeting. On the sidelines of the meeting, the minister met New Zealand's Trade Minister Todd McClay. The two leaders explored opportunities to give further impetus to bilateral trade and investment ties for the mutual growth of the two countries. Earlier, Piyush Goyal met Executive Vice President of the European Commission, Valdis Dombrovskis. The discussions focused on promoting India-EU trade and economic collaborations, including the ongoing FTA negotiations. India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar was received by his Mauritian counterpart Manish Gobin in Port Louis on Monday. Minister Jaishankar said that he looks forward to productive engagements to take forward the special relationship between India and Mauritius. The minister is on a 2-day visit, which marks one of the first bilateral engagements undertaken by him following his reappointment. Dr. S. Jaishankar and Mauritius Prime Minister Praveen Kumar Jugnauth jointly inaugurated high-impact community development projects there. Several memorandum of understandings were exchanged and overseas citizens of India were handed OCI cards in an event in Mauritian capital Port Louis. The two leaders also jointly addressed the media. So, External Affairs Minister also called on Mauritius Prime Minister and discussed ways to continue collaboration and strengthen India-Mauritius relations. In Bangladesh, the quota reform movement turned violent on Tuesday, resulting in the death of 3 people and injuries to over 100 in various varsities, including in the capital, Dhaka. The traffic in Dhaka came to a standstill as students demanding quota reform blocked several key points in the capital. The protesting students have blocked roads across Bangladesh, including highways and rail lines in various regions of the country. Minister of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare of India, Shivraj Singh Chauhan, inaugurated the 96th Indian Council of Agricultural Research Foundation and Technology Day in New Delhi on Tuesday. The celebrations featured a technology exhibition and industry interface as major attractions. Novel technologies developed by various ICAR institutes were showcased to benefit stakeholders and enhance agricultural production, quality and farmers' income. Key areas of the exhibition included sustainable and climate-resilient agriculture practices, eco-friendly technologies for rice, wheat, maize, pulses, oil seeds and other commercial crops were prominently displayed. The exhibition also highlighted mechanization, precision farming, value-added products as well. Additionally, the latest proven technologies in animal science, poultry and fisheries were exhibited for stakeholders' benefit.
इस संकल्प के साथ काम कर रहे हैं कि किसानों की आय भी बढ़ाएंगे, खेती के पूरे परिदृश्य को और परिवर्तित करेंगे और दुनिया का फूड बास्केट भारत को बना के दिखाएंगे। इंपोर्ट नहीं, एक्सपोर्ट करेगा भारत, चाहे वो अनाज हो, चाहे वो फल हो, चाहे वो सब्जियां हो।
A documentary called The Brink of Dreams became the first Egyptian documentary to back the prestigious Cannes Golden Eye Award this year. The movie is about a group of young women in Egypt's El Barsha village who formed a street theatre troupe to pursue their artistic dreams. Take a look.
Dreams don't know gender. So, a woman has the right to do everything, whether in art, in a job, or any field.
So, The Brink of Dreams shows struggles of native women in Egypt.
عشان بنحب المسرح ونعرف نعبر فيه عن رأينا وعن الحاجات اللي احنا عايزينها. ليش تلبس فستان من غير ما البس فوقيات؟ البنت ممنوع تختار شريك حياتها، انما الولد
That's it in this edition of DD India Global. Do let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. Connect with us on our different social media handles, Facebook, X, formerly Twitter and Instagram at DD India Live. And for those on the go, you can catch all the latest news and updates on our DD India mobile app. The app is available on both Android and iOS platforms. You can scan the QR code on the screen to download now. So we will be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Tanvi Taneja from my entire team here in New Delhi. Thank you for watching. Namaskar.